So, Scott, the question for this week's Scott's Thoughts is the grass really greener on the other side, and why do we choose to pursue it?
Greek poet Ovid first said, "The harvest is always richer in another man's field." Even as far back as 1st century BC, man has always been wired to covet, to chase, to not be satisfied. And thus, the grass is always greener. It's about envy and perception. It's about fantasy and fear. It's about wanting what you don't have and not appreciating what you do. And this affliction is real, and it affects nearly every aspect of our lives, from jobs to relationships to even our student athletes. But why does this happen? Why has it become part of our social DNA, and how is it affecting the way that our kids see the world? Well, it's definitely an interesting subject that runs a lot deeper than most realize. And I talk a lot about how a changing society helps facilitate a lot of these problems. And this one, it's no different. We live in a world that's constantly trapped in the honeymoon phase. No matter where we live or what we do, we always have one foot out the door and commit to almost nothing. We have learned to leave ourselves so many outs that when things get tough, fight or flight, well, that becomes just flight. There's so much to unpack with this topic, and there's no way I'll get into all of it, but hopefully I can give you enough to think about. So let's start with the fantasy. The fantasy that everyone's life is better than ours. Deep down, we know that not to be true, yet we chase it anyway. With the continued technological advancements and the destructive arm of social media, our minds are never quiet. We forget to focus on the present, or focus at all for that matter, and appreciate what's right in front of us. It's a byproduct of a fast-paced world where everyone is trying to get ahead, to have the next best product when it hits the market, the next best car, the next best job, the next best clothes, the next best spouse. We're so programmed in this honeymoon phase to want everything new that whatever it is that we have, the shine wears off quickly. And we are addicted to that shine. Just look at the way things have changed over the years. Back in the day, companies made products that lasted. My parents had an oven that lasted 50 years. Back then, people gave their word and they meant it. A handshake carried some weight, and things had depth. Things lasted. Now, we are paper thin, emotional rather than logical. We react but don't think. We jump but don't look. And we are driven by a fantasy and not reality. We are now conditioned to believe that nothing lasts and everything and everyone is replaceable. And it's this type of mentality that sometimes propels us away from stability, because stability is boring. Stability is stagnant. And instead of growing within what we have to recreate and liven things up because we're bored within what we have, we bail, because contentment is a lost virtue. And when you are discontent, you always want more and more and more, and your desire can never be satisfied. But when you practice contentment, you can say to yourself, I already have everything that I really need. Be happy with what you have and who you are, and be generous with both, and you won't have to hunt for happiness. Most of the time when we jump ship on something, it's because working through things isn't an option anymore. We see struggle and adversity as something to avoid, not something to help us grow. We see patience as a waste of time, and we see compromise as a deal we're not willing to make. Another layer to this, and largely thanks to technology, today we have choices, and sometimes too many. And you'd think that with the world at our fingertips, we'd all find something and be happy. Not so much. You see, the problem with too many choices is that we become restless. We become paralyzed with too much and can't make any decisions. Think about it like this. Ask a child what they want for dinner, but offer no suggestions and see how quickly they can make a decision. They often can't because there's too many options. But ask a child what they want for dinner and give them 3 things to choose from, and then notice how much more productive that is. However, I will say that choosing what and where to eat sometimes doesn't get any easier as an adult. So in this fast-paced world with too many options, we tend to suffer from choice overload, and too much choice kills the choice. For athletes, it's the exact same thing. They see a sports world that's littered with athletes jumping ship, chasing a better situation, a bigger contract, more spotlight. There's no loyalty there either. Just look at the NBA. Look at the transfer portal. And the exposure to this madness, it does affect our kids and what they perceive as normal. It tends to prioritize short-term results over long-term development. And so many times, all of it is driven by the parents who say, the coach is no good. They yell at my kid. My kid doesn't get enough playing time. And because our kids don't have enough life experience, these toxic thoughts now become the toxic thoughts of our children. Instead of encouraging them to advocate for themselves or work harder or even have a conversation about goal setting, we strip them of all responsibility for their decisions and severely damage any coping mechanisms they might have to overcome adversity. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes making that switch is the best thing for an athlete. They leave a bad situation and they thrive. Every circumstance is different. But sometimes they're wrong. They changed the situation, but they didn't change themselves. And will that change of environment change the attitude and the effort? For it's our actions, not our surroundings, that give us meaning. And hopefully, before they decide to leave a team or a school, or adults leave a job or a marriage, they reflect and have an honest moment with themselves and ask themselves, did they do everything possible to make things better before they started blaming everyone else? So what's the answer? Well, for one, clear the clutter. Focus on the present and be grateful for what you have and where you are. Eliminate choices. For our kids, man, they are completely overwhelmed in this world to the point of mental breakdowns, overall shutdowns, anxiety, depression. And when we see the lack of guidance they have as they blindly try to make their way through this mess, it isn't hard to figure out why so many spiral out of control. Too many choices, too many distractions, too much clutter. All of this without direction. You see, having goals, values, and guidance can help eliminate the clutter and keep you grounded, help simplify, and keep you on your side of the fence and not chasing the fantasy. For while you were busy looking at someone else's grass, there was someone else looking at yours. The foolish seek happiness in the distance. The wise man grows it under his feet. Out of calmness comes clarity, and out of clarity comes appreciation. Strive to be better, but stay grounded. Be careful of leaving something you need for something you want. And lastly, we all want to be happy. We all want situations that provide that for us. But too many of us are locked into the idea that we need complete overhaul to make that happen. And until you give up the idea that happiness is somewhere else, it will never be where you are. And those are Scott's thoughts.